Hey, my name's Hubwood, and in this video we will test 30 games on the ASUS ROG FLOW X13 with the 35-watt version of the RTX 3050 Ti and a Ryzen 9 5900HS CPU, accompanied by 16GB of 4200 MHz DDR4 RAM. Please check out my detailed review of this laptop if you're interested in this system. Now, all games were tested in ASUS's turbo mode and with an open display to ensure a maximum cooling performance. By the way, this laptop is capable of using NVIDIA's dynamic boost. In short, that means that the GPU can draw an extra 5 watt from the CPU in some cases. I'm not completely sure though why sometimes it didn't work. You'll notice in some games the GPU gets 35 watt and in others it sometimes gets 40 watts. Basically, that means that your 35-watt RTX 3050 Ti laptop could behave a bit different here and there, so keep that in mind. The first title for today will be Horizon Zero Dawn. On medium, or the so-called original settings, I saw an average of 54 FPS and a 1% low of 46. Love it or hate it, the game just looks amazing, even on medium settings, and it ran perfectly fine for a single-player action RPG. As you can see, the VRAM is just about to be full, but I didn't experience any frame drops for that matter. I would highly recommend this game for this machine. Enjoy! Next up was Battlefield 5 on a 64-player map on medium settings, as this laptop has a 120Hz display. Anything above 60 is gladly welcome. After I played for 2 to 3 minutes, the stutters were gone and I saw an average of 83 FPS and an acceptable 1% low of 48 FPS. Definitely playable, and the visuals are still alright. For CSGO, I've tested both high and low settings. On high, I saw an average of 162 with a good 1% low of 73 FPS. With low settings, the laptop scored an average of 240 FPS with a great 1% low of 133 FPS. But then again, CSGO runs on potatoes, so nothing special here. But you can definitely make use of that fast 120Hz screen. In ARK Survival Evolved, I was testing medium settings until I broke my leg, which miraculously healed within minutes, but then I got eaten by some monsters, so let's focus on the FPS, shall we? I saw an average of almost 50 FPS and a 1% low of 32. Playable, but ARK is known to be kinda demanding on hardware, and I have to say, the medium preset isn't exactly knocking it out of the ballpark. In Red Dead Redemption 2, I was getting an average of 43 FPS on medium settings with a 1% low of 35 FPS. The small 4GB VRAM still allows for high textures, so the game actually looks pretty pleasing and is absolutely playable on this tiny laptop. But for 60 FPS you would need to fiddle around a lot and end up probably on lots of low settings. For Call of Duty Warzone, I was using a mix of low, medium and high settings to achieve an average of 67 FPS with a good 1% low of 59 FPS. Playable, but lowering the graphics a bit would probably be a good idea in such a game to achieve 90 FPS or more, especially with that 120Hz screen. In Overwatch, I was using high settings and saw a great average of 138 FPS with a 1% low of 92 FPS, delivering a perfect experience on this machine. Absolutely no complaints here, it was kinda made for that kind of stuff, so enjoy yourself. In The Witcher 3, I saw an average of 55 FPS on ultra settings without hairworks. We all know the game looks great, and today it can be played perfectly fine on ultra settings on a 13-inch ultrabook. What a time to be alive, Geralt. What a time to be alive. The FPS in City Skylines surely depend on the size of the city, but with my small town, I was getting an average of 48 FPS with a 1% low of around 30 FPS on medium settings. For such a game, that is of course absolutely playable and probably enough. Next. Thanks to the amazing CPU in Anno 1800, I was getting an average of 50 FPS on high settings with a 1% low of 18. And of course, those numbers are also highly depend on the size of your cities and whether you test it on small islands, the Arctic, or your capital. So take those numbers with a grain of salt, but it's definitely playable and enjoyable and still looking great. In the free-to-play Battle Royale Apex Legends, I was using mostly high settings, resulting in an average of 94 FPS with a good 1% low of 60 FPS. No complaints here. Again, absolutely stable frame times and no stutters like at all. Great experience combined with good visuals. 120 FPS would be absolutely possible on lower settings. For Forza Horizon 4, I was using the integrated benchmark on ultra settings and saw an average of 71 FPS. Looking good, nice experience, recommendable and stable. In World of Tanks, I was using ultra settings as well and getting an average of 104 FPS with a great 1% low of 79 FPS. Absolutely smooth experience, no worries here. Next. In the newest installment of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I was using medium settings, resulting in a perfectly playable 63 FPS on average with fantastic 1% low of 52 FPS. Like in many other titles, the CPU keeps the frame times absolutely smooth and stable. You know, after a few years of running this channel, I really start to appreciate overpowered CPUs as they ensure a gameplay without stutterings. In Cyberpunk 2077 I was using the medium preset, and well, this is a tough one. I was getting an average of only 36 FPS and a 1% low of 26. This is a bit too low for a FPS-like shooter RPG game, so I also tested it with DLSS in balanced mode, which raised the average FPS up to 51 and the 1% low to 31. It definitely felt much better and the visuals don't suffer a lot, especially on such a small 13-inch screen. DLSS is the way to go here in my opinion. In Control I was also comparing DLSS with no DLSS. On medium settings and DLSS off, I saw an average of 37 FPS, again playable but a bit low, combined with a 1% low of 26 FPS. But with DLSS activated, I was able to raise the average FPS to 56 and the 1% low to 35 FPS. And as you might know, in this game, DLSS looks actually pretty great. So that's a no-brainer, DLSS on. In Fortnite, I was using the competitive settings, everything low with epic view distance, and achieving an average of 159 FPS with a 1% low of 54 FPS. But I'm pretty sure the 1% low could be better if you play a few rounds and all assets, shaders, etc. have been loaded. At least that's my experience. Using DLSS would not get you so much more FPS, so I didn't use it here. For GTA 5 I was using my standard high settings mix and saw an average of 85 FPS with a 1% low of 61 FPS. I guess a lot of you will be playing that title as it was a gift from the Epic Store and the online mode is still so popular. Absolutely smooth and enjoyable, no problems here. Next. For Jedi Fallen Order I was using the highest epic preset, which resulted in an average FPS above 60 and a 1% low of 41. Great visuals, great experience for a third-person action RPG, no worries here. Speaking of action RPGs, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider I was using the high preset and I saw an average of 60 FPS with a stable 1% low of 48 FPS. Again, third-person action RPG, you get my point, playable, enjoy some adventures with Lara. In my opinion, No Man's Sky is kinda hard to bench as the FPS depend so much on whether you're in space or on a planet or a station or a moon, etc. You get my point. Nevertheless, I saw an average of 74 FPS on the enhanced preset with a 1% low of 33 FPS. The game actually improved a lot over the years and doesn't look half bad for its incredible world size. For Rainbow Six Siege I was only using the integrated benchmark, which resulted in an average of 180 FPS on ultra settings. I have no idea on how to play that game, so I hope that'll still help you a bit in choosing whether it's good or not. But I'm guessing no worries here, 180 FPS is great on ultra. I've had some problems with the free-to-play title Valorant, as I was not able to get the GPU to run at 100%. I don't know why, and I've tried a lot. So I only saw an average of 170 FPS on Ultra with a 1% low of 88, which is perfectly playable of course, but I was expecting more I guess. In Watchdogs Legion I saw a stable average of 62 FPS on medium settings with a 1% low of 42 FPS. In my opinion, no need for DLSS here unless you want to raise the graphics a bit or save some energy and cap the FPS at 60. Perfectly playable, no worries here. Rocket League was a piece of cake on ultra settings with a high average of 200 FPS and a 1% low of 113 FPS. Free-to-play esport titles, right? They know how to get those high FPS. Despite its old school looks, Valheim actually needs strong hardware, but I'm absolutely okay with this because I love the lighting and the atmosphere. So shh! On medium settings with lots of extras as seen here, I scored an average of 50 FPS and a 1% low of 34. Of course, for that kind of games, that's playable. And further optimization of the tiny developer team could provide a better performance in the future, who knows. In Metro Exodus I was only using the integrated benchmark, once more achieving an average of 46 FPS with a 1% low of 21 FPS on average on high settings. So maybe using medium would be the way to go in that title, as we're talking about an FPS shooter here. PUBG's performance improved a lot over the years, and on high settings I was getting an average of 81 FPS and a 1% low of 45 FPS. Perfectly playable, and if you need over 90 or even 120 FPS, using low or medium settings would absolutely be your weapon of choice, I guess. Far Cry 5 looks great on high settings, and I saw a good average of 70 FPS with a 1% low of 55 FPS. Absolutely enough for a single player shooter, I would say. Okay, I'm sure he's just sleeping here, right? Right? By the way, sorry for my drunken gameplay, but using the capture card often results in severe delays, which feels like your latency is almost 1 second sometimes. Impossible to aim properly. And last but not least, I was testing League of Legends on max settings, resulting in an average of 200 FPS and a 1% low of 138. But once again, I wasn't getting the GPU to use more than 50% and the CPU being bored out. Hello Riot Games, what's going on in your games with that laptop? So that's all for today. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing to the channel, like the video. So see you next time, thank you for watching, bye bye and tschüss.